Neville Goddard, Out of This World, Thinking Fourth Dimensionally, 1949. Oh, this is going to get good. Love it. 4D. All right, Chapter 1, Out of This World. And now I have told you before it come to pass, that when it is come to pass, ye might believe. John 14:29. Many persons, myself included, have observed events before they occurred, that is, before they occurred in the world of three dimensions. Since man can observe an event before it occurs in three dimensions of space, life on Earth must proceed according to plan, and this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be slowly moving through our space. Interesting. Okay. There's a lot in that first paragraph that is very fascinating. Since man can observe an event before it occurs in three dimensions of space, life on Earth must proceed according to plan, and this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be slowly moving through our space. You have our space, let's say you are here in three dimensions, and here you are, and I know we're going to be covering this here shortly, but I wanted to kind of give this as a kind of a concept. Let's call this 3D. Let's call this 4D. The shadow on the ground here, and I don't know how to do that. Let's say it's, well, that's going to be very difficult to draw a shadow, but let's for fun say that's the shadow on the ground. That's 2D. Okay? So 4D, you don't physically see it. You see 3D, but 3D is the shadow of your four-dimensional self, and 3D also casts a shadow in 2D, let's say on the ground, let's say you're outside in the sunlight. This one, as this sentence is saying, life on Earth must proceed according to a plan, and this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and be slowly moving through our space. So it's happening here, then it shows up here, is an after effect. The cause and reality is in 4D. When you make that impression on your subconscious, that is reality. That is 4D. If the occurring events were not in this world when they were observed, then, to be perfectly logical, they must have been out of this world. And whatever is there to be seen before it occurs here must be predetermined from the point of view of man awake in a three-dimensional world. Thus the question arises, are we able to alter our future? My object in writing these pages is to indicate possibilities inherent in man to show that man can alter his future, but thus altered, it forms again a deterministic sequence starting from the point of interference, a future that will be consistent with the alteration. The most remarkable feature of man's future is its flexibility. The most remarkable feature of man's future is its flexibility. It is determined by his attitudes rather than by his acts. The cornerstone on which all things are based is man's concept of himself. The cornerstone on which all things are based is man's concept of himself. And we know our self-concepts are within. We have all that is, I am God right here, and all of our self-concepts come from Him. We are of Him, whether I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm fat, I'm skinny, whatever the word you want to use this week, it doesn't make a difference. Here you are today in a self-concept. Here's a self-concept you desire to be. To make that change from this self-concept to that self-concept, you impress your subconscious and become objectified in the new self-concept, which incidentally does have a subconscious, of course. The cornerstone on which all things are based is man's concept of himself. Whatever man's concept is of himself, this is the cornerstone on which all things are based. He acts as he does and has the experiences that he does because his concept of himself is what it is. and for no other reason. Had he a different concept of himself, he would act differently. A change of concept of self automatically alters his future. And a change in any term of his future series of experiences reciprocally alters his concept of self. We're going to have to take some leaps here. He's talking about future, but I'm here to tell you there is no future. There's only now and now. This is where you are today. This is where you are tomorrow. But in reality, what he just said is that new self-concept of you also is the same energy as that old self-concept of you. It's actually sending back, if you want to play with the idea of linear as a past, the present, and a future, left, middle, and right. Past is on the left, middle's in the future. I'm sorry, middle's the present, and the right is the future. I just saw a video about a turtle. Fascinating. A turtle has on its back the 13 moons. I did not know this. We have a friend that has a turtle in their backyard, and it's a loving pet, and it has these divisions on the back of a turtle, has the 13 like little sections right in the middle of the turtle's back, and they represent the 13 moons of the year. A new moon is every 28 days, which in a year, 365 days, there's 13 moons. And around the outer edge of the turtle's back is 28 little divisions as well, which is very fascinating. I never knew that. Very fascinating. But the video I watched I'll put it in the description, had an old saying that a turtle, the tail was the past, the back is the present, and the head outstretched is the future. It makes good sense because this is leading the way. And that back there is where you were. Up here is where you're going. Right here is where you are. Similar concept. Here's where you were. Here's where you are, according to all that is, Him, God, in the present. All self-concepts are done. So how else are we supposed to look at this than with I'm currently here, but I want to be there? We use time like this to represent where I'm at, where I'm going to be, but in actuality, you'll never be there unless you're there now. You will never arrive unless you change that self-concept now, which actually literally means your self-concept is both. But when you put the feeling in this one, you arrive in that one, whatever the new self-concept is. Man's assumptions, which he regards as insignificant, produce effects that are considerable. Therefore, man should revise his estimate of an assumption and recognize its creative power. Very, very important point. A change of concept of self automatically alters his future, and a change in any term of his future series of experiences reciprocally alters his concept of self. All change takes place in consciousness. The future, although prepared in every detail in advance, has several outcomes. At every moment of our lives, we have before us the choice of which of several futures we will choose. At every moment of our lives, every moment. I mix my understanding that I've learned in the Seth material because with Neville material, because it's a large degree of this is understanding how time works and that it's all now. Everything is in one moment. I've said it a million times. If you're aware of the moment, then you don't have to be aware of anything else. It's becoming aware of the point you are right now. Moment, point, awareness. And if you're here where all consciousness is, aware of your moment point, you're in and now. Again, let me just bring this up. Look at children. Look at any children at play. They aren't thinking about past or future whatsoever. They're only captively activated and present in one place and space, and that's right here, right now. Nothing else besides maybe starting to feel hungry, and then their new now is going to be eating lunch. But they're currently always activated and present right in the now. So we use, you and me, having forgot that activity of play, we use this concept of here's where I am now, but here's where I want to be tomorrow. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just being aware that you are in a now. And in that now is where you have to create the feeling of where you want to be in your new now. I know new alludes to past, but stick with me. I'm going to keep throwing in my ideas about the present moment and its power, all right? All changes take place in consciousness. The future, although prepared in every detail in advance, has several outcomes. At every moment of our lives, we have before us the choice of which of several futures we will choose. Now, going back and playing with the future, we're here now. Let's say that's where we are today, right now. Let's go ahead and go with what Neville's saying here. At every moment of our lives, we have the opportunity to choose which future we want. All these self-concepts exist simultaneously. All of them exist, all of them are done. All his creations are done. All probabilities exist at once. This probability you're in right now has open to it any future. Any opportunity is available to you. Any self-concept. You want to be a thousandaire, you want to be a millionaire, you want to be a billionaire, you want to be a trillion. It doesn't matter. You want to be single and alone and it's wonderful to have that kind of life, or do you want to be in love, married, and with a partner? Do you want to be healthy and feel good all the time and do all kinds of exercises and just feel fit, or do you want to be not healthy and getting the prescriptions and getting your friends feeling sorry for you? I'm not saying that sick people are just about that, but you have any self-concept available in your future at any moment of your life. There are two actual outlooks on the world possessed by everyone, a natural focus and a spiritual focus. The ancient teachers called the one the carnal mind, the other the mind of Christ. We may differentiate them as ordinary waking consciousness governed by our senses and a controlled imagination governed by desire. We may differentiate them as ordinary waking consciousness governed by our senses. That's right where we are here. Where we're in our subconscious, when we're tied into a consciousness. Controlled imagination governed by desire. Desire is coming from him. All that is comes into each of us. We recognize these two distinct centers of thought in the statement, the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, for they are spiritually discerned. The natural view confines reality to the moment called now. To the natural view, the past and future are purely imaginary. The spiritual view, on the other hand, sees the contents of time. It sees events as distinct and separated as objects in space. Spiritual view. The past and future are a present whole to the spiritual view. As I was discussing, it's all now, one moment. What is mental and subjective to the natural man is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. What's mental and subjective to the natural man is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. The spiritual man can see it objectively as his current now, even though he's here. To the natural man, it's mental and subjective, meaning he only sees here now. The spiritual man sees not only his subjective self, but sees his objective self, where he is, where he can be. The habit of seeing, also objective and subjective, is within yourself. So here you are objective, and your subjective is your subconscious. So you're making that impression onto your subconscious, your subjective self, to impact your self-concept. You have an objective and a subjective, like you have a masculine and feminine. And I believe that's what he's talking about. What's mental and subjective to the natural man, mental and subjective to the natural man, is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. Either way you want to take that one. The habit of seeing only that which our senses permit renders us totally blind to what otherwise we could see. To cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we should often deliberately disentangle our minds from the evidence of the senses and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all the distinctness of reality. Mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all distinctness of reality. See the invisible. How does it feel to be holding a lemon? How does it feel to be holding a lemon? How does it feel to be smelling that lemon you're holding? Now you are ignoring the senses because your eyes are closed. But when you're holding the lemon in your hand, you know what it feels like because you've held a lemon before. You know what it smells like because you smelled a lemon before. You've just taken, to cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible, we should often deliberately disentangle our minds from the evidence of our senses close off our eyeballs, and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all the distinctness of reality. I could go surfing right now. I could close my eyes and I could feel myself dropping in on a wave right now. I can feel that. I literally can feel it because I've done it so many times. So I'm familiar with the feeling of it. Earnest, concentrated thought focused in a particular direction shuts out other sensations and causes them to disappear. We have but to concentrate on the state desired in order to see it. The habit of withdrawing attention from the region of sensation and concentrating it on the invisible develops our spiritual outlook and enables us to penetrate beyond the world of sense and to see that which is invisible. So I just used the lemon and I just used surfing. You can use anything you're familiar with. You must get this exercise going. You don't have to all of a sudden start with the house, the new house you're living in when you're renting right now. You can, whatever you're familiar with is what you should start this with. It's like prime the pump with what works. The lemon, tennis ball, golf ball. Start with what works. Close off to your senses. Imagine holding a golf ball. You know it's dimpled. You know what its weight feels like. You know the touch of it. So even though I don't have it in my hand, feel it's in your hand. Practice. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Romans 1:20. Very good quote. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. This vision is completely independent of the natural faculties. Open it and quicken it. Without it, these instructions are useless, for things of the Spirit are spiritually discerned. A little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. A little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. Desire is the mainspring of action. Desire is the mainspring of action. We could not move a single finger unless we had a desire to move it. No matter what we do, we follow the desire which at the moment dominates our minds. When we break a habit, our desire to break it is greater than our desire to continue in the habit. The desires which impel us to action are those that hold our attention. A desire is but an awareness of something we lack or need to make our life more enjoyable. A desire is but an awareness of something we lack or need to make our life more enjoyable. Doesn't that sound wonderful? What about that chair? What about that pillow? What about that new car? What about that house? What about that partner? What about riding that wave? Desires always have some personal gain in view. The greater the anticipated gain, the more intense is the desire. It makes good sense. There is no absolutely unselfish desire. There it is. There is no absolutely unselfish desire. Where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire. And consequently, no action. We have a couple very profound sentences right there. There is no absolutely unselfish desire. Where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire, and consequently no action. You can see what motivates us. The problem and the solution are in the desire. When you're in this self-concept and you have a desire for somewhere else, it's the desire that came in and filled you with this urge. It seems to you a problem, but it also has the solution embedded within it. Therefore, impression into your subconscious, objectifying your new reality in that fulfilled desire. Where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire, and consequently no action. You won't make that impression upon your subconscious self. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man. Spiritual man speaks to the natural man. That's all us. Through the language of desire, the key to progress in life and to the fulfillment of dreams lies in ready obedience to its voice. Unhesitating obedience to its voice is an immediate assumption of the wish fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. As Pascal has said, you would not have sought me had you not already found me. Very profound statement. Man, by assuming the feeling of his wish fulfilled, and then living and acting on this conviction, alters the future in harmony with his assumption. Assumptions awaken what they affirm. As soon as man assumes the feeling of his wish fulfilled, his four-dimensional self finds ways for the attainment of this end, discovers methods for its realization. I know of no clearer definition of the means by which we realize our desires than to experience in imagination what we would experience in the flesh were we to achieve our goal. Very potent sense, I will repeat it. I know of no clearer definition of the means by which we realize our desires than to experience in imagination what we would experience in the flesh were we to achieve our goal. This experience of the end wills the means. With its larger outlook, again, you never have to be concerned with the how. This experience of the end wills the means. If you're here and you're single and you want to be married, and you experience the end in your imagination and you feel it as you're falling asleep especially, it wills the means, because it goes into their Father, he that hath it is given, and therefore the objectification. You never, ever, ever get concerned with the how. Ignore anything to do with the word how. The experience of the end wills the means. With its larger outlook, the four-dimensional self then constructs the means necessary to realize the accepted end. The undisciplined mind finds it difficult to assume a state which is denied by the senses. The undisciplined mind. Here's a technique that will make it easy to encounter events before they occur. To call things which are not seen as though they were. People have a habit of slighting the importance of simple things, but this simple formula for changing the future was discovered after years of searching and experimenting. The first step in changing the future is desire. That is, define your objective. Know definitely what you want. Secondly, hold on. Have we done that? Have we done this first step? This is only one sentence, and it can be a very, very difficult sentence, because if you don't simply do this one first step, how are you going to get to your desire? Do you know simply what you want? Define your objective. There was a line in Bruce Almighty, Jim Carrey and Morgan Freeman, and right in the middle of the movie somewhere, Morgan Freeman and Jim Carrey are up in that empty floor of the building, and Morgan says to Jim Carrey's character, does anybody really know what they want? And Jim Carrey was in the thrux of this exact problem, and his character was in that movie. Very good movie, especially when this is right in the heart of the middle of the movie. And Morgan's character was God, by the way. I recommend the movie, especially because of that message. But it is very much the biggest first thing that has to be done. If you do not have a desire or an objective, what is it you're going to manifest? What is it you're going to consciously manifest? Or are you just riding along, floating along down the river on a inner tube, floating along down the river, letting it take you wherever you want to go, as Neville talked about in The Search? Oh. The first step in changing the future is desire. That is, define your objective. Know definitely what you want. Let's review. Close off the senses, go in the closet, close the door, and pray in secret. You go into, you close off the senses, means you close your eyes, you do your I am meditation. I am, I am, I am. And you ask yourself, what is it that I would enjoy? What do I really, really enjoy? Let anything float right to the top. You can also do this wonderfully. I've made a practice of this one. Right before you're going to sleep, ask a very important question and know with conviction that the first thing that floats to the top of your mind right when you wake up is going to be the answer to your question. Ask the question as you're falling asleep. What is it I really, really enjoy and want to do with my life? What is it I like? What is it that makes good sense to me? Go to sleep with that question on your mind and know to yourself that when you wake up, what's floating right to the top of your mind right when you wake up is your answer. It works really well. But understand also your awareness of being is where you first come out of. When you first come out of the dream state, when you first come out of the dream state, you're in the awareness of being, which is here. Then you load in your self-concept. So when you first start thinking, you already arrived in your self-concept. But when you first came out of that dream state, your sleeping state, you were plugged in here where all the answers are, where all wisdom is. I and my Father are one. My Father is greater than I. You ask the question as you fall to sleep, which is making an impression into your subconscious. That is plugged into all consciousness, which is Him. When you first wake up, that first answer that floats in with you into your self-concept is your answer. So I hope that adds a little bit. First step can be a doozy. Secondly, all right, now that we get the first step done. Secondly, construct an event which you believe you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. An event which implies fulfillment of your desire. Something that will have the action of self-predominant. Oh my gosh, go to the end. When you are going to get married and you take your honeymoon on Hawaii, because over here you were single and you said, I am that happily married I am, and you were imagining your married self, you went to the end by presupposing you were walking into your new home, having come back from the airport, coming back from your honeymoon, coming back from the 2 weeks, coming back from getting married, walking into your home, whether that's your home or new home or what have you, being carried over the threshold, you're happy to be back. That one picture presupposes every single thing else that went with it. You got the vacation, you went to Hawaii, you were proposed to, you got married, you had the wonderful time of your life. Maybe you went on a cruise, you went on a helicopter ride, you went zip lining, you went inner tubing, literally in Hawaii, they have that. You can do anything. You went snorkeling, you went surfing, you went body surfing, you did it all. But the moment when you walk back into your humble abode, you are nice and complete. You felt relieved. That relief is what we're talking about. You felt that feeling of relief when you walked back into your place. It presupposed every other thing that came before it. Repeating the second step, construct an event in which you believe you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire, an event which implies fulfillment of your desire, something that will have the action of self-predominant. Third, immobilize the physical body and induce a condition akin to sleep. Lay down, sit down in your comfortable chair, immobilize. Lie on a bed or relax in a chair and imagine that you are sleepy. Then, with eyelids closed and your attention focused on the action you intend to experience, in imagination, mentally feel yourself right into the proposed action, imagining all the while that you are actually performing the action here and now. Imagining all the while you are actually performing the action here and now. What is the difference, I say to you, between your imagining it already done and being a fact that you went to Hawaii, got married, had your honeymoon, and you're flying back now? What is the difference between your imagining the experience versus the actual experience, and it's 2 months later? When you describe it to somebody else, a third person, and you're describing the memory that you just drummed up within yourself versus the actual experience, are they that much different? This is how you can get closer. Imagine, let's use that. Imagine going to your friend and telling him the same thing you're trying to imagine now. If you don't feel yourself drumming up the experience, then imagine you're telling a friend about the experience. This will help bolster what you can say to that friend. What would be the most wonderful way you could describe this experience you just had, getting proposed to, getting married in Hawaii, having your honeymoon, then coming home, and all the experiences in between? What's the difference in you having had the experience and the other one where you imagined it as real, when either one of those you can describe to your friend with the accuracy of either one? Does it make a difference? Does it make a difference if this one is an imagining and this one actually happened to your friend? No, it doesn't make a difference. And to test that, you can surprise a friend with any statement. You can use any statement. You can tell a friend who calls you on the phone, just tell them something wild that just happened. And I don't even want to give examples right here, but you know what to say. Tell them, oh, you're not going to guess what happened. Just such and such just happened. And this could be alluding to what you're imagining. And they'll go, oh, that's great, because they won't judge. They're there to help celebrate your newfound freedom, your newfound love, your newfound finance, your newfound anything, health. When you surprise a friend with a lie, you'll be amazed at their reaction when they don't know it's an actual untruth. I said the word lie, I should say an imagining. Just surprise somebody when they call you. Surprise them with something. Just say, oh, you're not going to guess what happened. And then just unveil, I just met somebody, we went on a date and we're totally in love now. And they're, oh, that's great news. And you'll see how simple the reactions of the world are when they follow what you've imagined is as strong as if you've actually experienced it. It's the same value. It's only in you that it's perceived to be different. So you use that. Okay. You must always participate in the imaginary action, not merely stand back and look on, but you must feel that you are actually performing the action so that the imaginary sensation is real to you. It is important always to remember that the proposed action must be one which follows the fulfillment of your desire, and also you must feel yourself into the action until it has all the vividness and distinctness of reality. For example, suppose you desired promotion in office. Being congratulated would be an event you would encounter following the fulfillment of your desire. Having selected this action as the one you will experience in imagination, immobilize the physical body, lay down, and induce a state akin to sleep, a drowsy state. I am sleepy, so very sleepy. Okay? But one in which you are still able to control the direction of your thoughts. A state in which you are attentive without effort. Now, imagine that a friend is standing before you. Put your imaginary hand into his. First, feel it to be solid and real, okay? Then carry on an imaginary conversation with him in harmony with the action. Do not visualize yourself at a distance in point of space and at a distance in point of time, being congratulated on your good fortune. Instead, make elsewhere here, and the future now. The future event is a reality now, in a dimensionally larger world. And oddly enough, now in a dimensionally larger world is the equivalent to here in ordinary three-dimensional space of everyday life. The difference between feeling yourself in action here and now and visualizing yourself in action as though you were on a motion picture screen is the difference between success and failure. The difference will be appreciated if you will now visualize yourself climbing a ladder. Oh, I love this wonderful example. This happens to be what really woke me up to Neville. Let's give what he says, and I'll throw in my experience. The difference will be appreciated if you will now visualize yourself climbing a ladder. We can all do that, okay? Just grab the rungs, put your feet on a rung, put one hand, put the other foot, and climb the ladder. Imagine yourself, visualize yourself climbing the ladder. That means these are closed, you're visualizing. Then with eyelids closed, and imagine that a ladder is right in front of you and feel you are actually climbing it, okay? Desire, physical immobility bordering on sleep, and imaginary action in which self-feelingly predominates here and now are not only important factors in altering the future, but they are essential conditions in consciously projecting the spiritual self. If when the physical body is immobilized, we become possessed of the idea to do something and imagine that we are doing it here and now, and keep the imaginary action feelingly going right up until sleep ensues, we are likely to awaken out of the physical body to find ourselves in a dimensionally larger world with a dimensionally larger focus and actually doing what we desired and imagined we were doing in the flesh. But whether we awaken or not, we are actually performing the action in the fourth dimensional world, and we will reenact it in the future, here in the third dimensional world. My experience with the ladder was after I discovered a video of a student of Neville's talking about how Neville told, when he was taking classes with Neville, he was told to come back if he goes home and climbs the ladder over the next week or a couple 3 days, to say, I will not climb a ladder all day, and post it on pieces of paper, and then at night imagine yourself climbing a ladder. And you can look this up on YouTube, the videos are everywhere. If I find it, I'll put it in the description. But the idea is to go to sleep doing the action, but all day long staking the claim that I will not climb a ladder, I will not climb a ladder, I will not climb a ladder. But when you fall to sleep, you imagine yourself climbing a ladder. Well, when I discovered that video, it was the morning time, it was about 5 a.m., and I just did it in my mind. I says, okay, I will not climb a ladder, but I know how to climb a ladder, so I can see myself climbing a ladder. And I took like 7 Post-its, 5 a.m., went to work. At work, I hadn't been on a ladder in a long time. And I had to go show somebody some work that needed to be done. And to show him above this certain space, I had to literally get on this vertical ladder. So, it's a ladder that's attached to a wall, basically. It was on this machinery. I had to go up that ladder. It was 9 a.m. It was only 4 hours later. And it had been a long while since I was on a ladder. So I was on that ladder and I was pointing out this stuff that I needed him to do. And I was pointing around and I'm like going, oh my gosh, I'm actually on a ladder. I thought this was going to take several days. It was like 4 hours. 9 o'clock, something like that. I was already on this ladder and I had written it down. I put the Post-it in my wallet. I put the Post-it in my car. I put one on my mirror. I did all of that was in the video, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And boom, I was already on the ladder within a couple hours. So it just knocked me off my socks, and that's when I really dove off the diving board into Neville, because I knew how profound and real this was, because it had worked so fast for me, and and my previous 33 years, or at that point 30 years of this study. I've studied Seth material for 30 years and a lot of other metaphysical subjects. So I had already been heavily steeped in the idea that you create your own reality, especially with my study of the Seth material for at least 2.5 decades with my teacher. And then she left the party. And then I had 5 more years before I got into Ho'oponopono. I did that for 2 years straight, continuously, just that. Then it brought me at the steps of the Neville Goddard. So that's 30 years, then 2 years, then now, approximate. Then I got into Neville 3 years ago. This was about January 1st of 22 when I discovered that ladder situation. Yeah. Then I dove off, like you all. It's worth it. It's worth the ride. All right. Experience has taught me to restrict the imaginary action, to condense the idea which is to be the object of our meditation into a single act, and to reenact it over and over again until it has the feeling of reality. You get up to the top of the ladder, you climb back down to the bottom, get off the ladder, then see the ladder again, and go back up the ladder and come back down the ladder. If you're falling asleep and you think of something else, come back over to the ladder. Otherwise, the attention will wander off along an associational track. and hosts of associated images will be presented to our attention. We will lose focus. In a few seconds, they will lead us hundreds of miles away from our objective in point of space and years away in point of time. If we decide to climb a particular flight of stairs because that is the likely event to follow the realization of our desire, then we must restrict the action to climbing that particular flight of stairs. Should our attention wander off, we must bring it back to its task of climbing that flight of stairs and keep on doing so until the imaginary action has all the solidity and distinctness of reality. The idea must be maintained in the field of presentation without any sensible effort on our part. The idea must be maintained in the field of presentation without any sensible effort on our part. We must, with the minimum of effort, permeate the mind with the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Wander, your mind goes over here, you're thinking of grade school, come back to the ladder. You're climbing the ladder, then all of a sudden you're flying somewhere, come back to the ladder. Now you're climbing the ladder and you get to the top and you're starting to climb back down, and all of a sudden you're in your car driving the freeway earlier today. No, come back to the ladder. Stop that. Come back to the ladder. Climbing the ladder. All of a sudden, before you know it, you're falling asleep. You're asleep. But you are the one that must apply the discipline to come back to the ladder, because it's easy to drift away from the ladder. Let's use this ladder as a very, very fun example to start and try for yourself. So you wander off and you're floating, flying, doing anything but climbing the ladder. Bring yourself back. Consciously remind yourself about the ladder. Try. And each night it gets better and stronger. Drowsiness facilitates change because it favors attention without effort. But it must not be pushed to the stage of sleep, in which we shall no longer be able to control the movements of our attention, but rather a moderate degree of drowsiness in which we are still able to direct our thoughts. A most effective way to embody a desire is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then, in a relaxed and sleepy state, repeat over and over again like a lullaby any short phrase which implies fulfillment of our desire, such as "thank you," as though we address the higher power for having done it for us. If, however, we sink a conscious projection into a dimensionally larger world, then we must keep the action going right up until sleep ensues. Experience in imagination, with all the distinctness of reality, what would be experienced in the flesh were you to achieve your goal, and you shall in time meet in the flesh as you met in your imagination. Again, as I said before, you literally are already doing this consistently. You're already really, actually very, very good at this. It's a skill set you have been using since you're a little kid, period. You're doing it right now. What we're doing here together and going over this material, and this book particularly, is bringing to your awareness how to apply it consciously to that which you desire. You might know you've done this all the time. You might know when you were a kid you would think of things and they would come true. You might know as a teenager. You might know as a young adult. And maybe at some point you forgot. Maybe at some point you'd rather not be focused on that kind of fulfillment. You'd rather let the cards fall where they may. Let the dice fall where they may, or what have you. And you'd like the surprise. But maybe you want to come back to that conscious awareness. So this is how you do it. You're in a self-concept. You have a desire. Maybe you've ignored that desire. And maybe you've been stuck in this loop over and over with the desire on static pause all this time, whatever amount of time we're talking about. But now you realize, wait a minute, I want to go ahead and take conscious control of meeting my desire. Because my desire sounds like a fun, fulfilling thing to do. Okay, well, I just need to make a subconscious impression. That is going to help fulfill the objectification of my desire. What we're doing here is becoming consciously aware of how to do that. Feed the mind with premises, that is, assertions presumed to be true, because assumptions, though unreal to the senses, if persisted in until they have the feeling of reality, will harden into facts. Very impotent sentence. No, I didn't mean that. Important. Feed the mind with premises, that is, assertions presumed to be true. Feed the mind. with premises that feed the mind with premises, that is, assertions presumed to be true, because assumptions, though unreal to the senses, if persisted in until they have the feeling of reality, will harden into facts. To an assumption, all means which promote its realization are good. To an assumption, all means which promote its realization are good. It influences the behavior of all by inspiring in all the movements, the actions, and the words which tend towards its fulfillment. Oh my goodness. He's talking about an assumption and the life of an assumption right there. To understand how man molds his future in harmony with his assumption, we must know what we mean by a dimensionally larger world, for it is to a dimensionally larger world that we go to alter our future. The observation of an event before it occurs implies that the event is predetermined from the point of view of man in the three-dimensional world. Therefore, to change the conditions here in the three dimensions of space, we must first change them in the four dimensions of space. Man does not know exactly what is meant by a dimensionally larger world, and would no doubt deny the existence of a dimensionally larger self. He is quite familiar with the three dimensions of length, width, and height, and he feels that if there were a fourth dimension, it should be just as obvious to him as the dimensions of length, width, and height. A dimension is not a line. It is any way in which a thing can be measured that is entirely different from all other ways. That is, to measure a solid fourth dimensionally, we simply measure it in any direction except that of its length, width, and height. That is, to measure a solid fourth dimensionally, we simply measure it in any direction except its length, width, and height. Is there another way of measuring an object other than those of its length, width, and height? Time measures my life without employing the three dimensions of length, width, and height. There's no such thing as an instantaneous object. Its appearance and disappearance are measurable. It endures for a definite length of time. We can measure its lifespan without using the dimensions of length, width, and height. Time is definitely a fourth way of measuring an object. The more dimensions an object has, the more substantial and real it becomes. A straight line which lies entirely in one dimension acquires shape, mass, and substance by the addition of dimensions. What new quality would time, the fourth dimension, give, which would make it just as vastly superior to solids as solids are to surfaces, and surfaces as to lines are to lines? Time is a medium for changes in experience because all changes take time. Time is a medium for changes in experience because all changes take time. The new quality is changeability. Observe that if we bisect a solid, its cross-section will be a surface. By bisecting a surface, we obtain a line, and by bisecting a line, we get a point. This means that a point is but a cross-section of a line, which is in turn but a cross-section of a surface, which is in turn but a cross-section of a solid, which is in turn, if carried to its logical conclusion, but a cross-section of a fourth dimensional object. We cannot avoid the inference that all three-dimensional objects are but cross-sections of four-dimensional bodies, which means when I meet you, I meet a cross-section of the four-dimensional you. The four-dimensional you that is not seen. To see the fourth-dimensional self, I must see every cross-section or moment of your life from birth to death and see them all coexisting. Very interesting point, and Seth brought this up. Somebody brought up astrology or birth chart in an ESP class to Seth, and Seth said, I would have to see to do a proper astrological chart, I would have to see your birth date and your death date. Which you're like, whoa. But Seth, as we are becoming, when we understand this material, Seth, when he talked to the students who would ask a question, he would literally address their entire self, meaning he would address with the knowledge of all their probable futures and pasts at once, as all complete. He would address the probable one asking the question and would give the answer that fit best that probable version of that student at that moment, in that space, in that time. The same applies to us. This is my self-concept today, and infinitely available are all self-concepts because they are all done. All his creations are done. So if I have one self-concept I am occupying right now, infinitely available are all the others. Okay? If I am imagining lovingly for another, and my self-concept's here, and I'm imagining for my friend that he is winning the trifecta at the racetrack, then I subjectively impress myself upon my subconscious that he's communicating to me that he won the trifecta and is coming to a large sum of money. That subconscious impression is happening here within him. But it's the awareness of all of the idea that all of these are available. I don't just say that to myself that only this one's available to my friend. I am literally conscious aware because of these years of study, 33 years. I am consciously aware that not only does my friend exist as the winner of that trifecta, but he exists as in every other form. I know when I talk to him, because I talked to him this morning, in fact, I know I'm talking to the one I'm talking to, but I know there are tons available. The infinite amount of the variations of him are available. So when I imagine loving that he wins at the horse track, I know I'm communicating with that one there. Even though he didn't tell me on the phone today, I know that phone call's coming. I know that phone call's coming. That conversation will happen. I already know because I've already imagined it lovingly from myself. But again, the point is here where we're at, is that all of the versions of him are available. When I imagine lovingly for him in one state, I can do and use any state. To see the fourth dimensional self, I must see every cross-section or moment of your life from birth to death and see them all coexisting. My focus should take in the entire array of sensory impressions which you have experienced on earth, plus those you might encounter. I should see them not in the order in which they were experienced by you, but as the present whole. What we just described. Because change is the characteristic of the fourth dimension, I should see them in a state of flux as a living, animated whole. If we have all of this clearly fixed in our minds, what does it mean to us in this three-dimensional world? It means that if we can move along time's length, we can see the future and alter it as we so desire. This world which we think so solidly real is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may at any time pass. This world which we think so solidly real is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may at any time pass. It is an abstraction from a more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, a more fundamental world abstracted from a still more fundamental and dimensionally larger world, and so on to infinity. The absolute is unattainable by any means or analysis, no matter how many dimensions we add to the world. Whew, doggy. What a wonderful sentence. This one here. This world which we think so solidly real is a shadow out of which and beyond which we may at any time pass. We already know the fourth dimension is the reality, and we're creating the third dimensional. The third dimensional is the shadow. In a previous video, we were studying the fact that your self-concept here is impressing your subconscious to become a new self-concept. Well, this impression here is happening in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is where reality is. Reality casts a shadow of a new dimension, of a new dimensional self in space. Space, your 3D self, is the shadow of this fourth dimensional self. Fourth dimensional self is casting this shadow. This shadow is casting that shadow. That's the two-dimensional self. If I were to outline the shadow on the wall, that's a two-dimensional image like that is, because it's just a line. That's the two-dimensional shadow of my 3D self, and the 3D self is a shadow of my fourth dimensional self. My fourth dimensional self is when I feel it real, when I feel an experience, when I feel and hear my friend calling me to tell me of his celebration of winning the racetrack, the bet he had at the racetrack. My fourth dimensional reality, when I hear that, hear his voice, sharing his celebration, I say congratulations back, that's fourth dimensional reality. When I imagine it. When he calls me and tells me and shares the good news, now it's in 3D reality, that's the shadow experience. That's an already thing has happened. Now I'm experiencing it in time. Time came after the fourth dimensional creation. Time is second. Then the shadow here, let's say he's counting his money. The shadow is then after the three-dimensional awakening, if you will. Man can prove the existence of a dimensionally larger world simply by focusing his attention on an invisible state and imagining that he sees and feels it. If he remains concentrated in this state, his present environment will pass away. And he will awaken in a dimensionally larger world where the object of his contemplation will be seen as a concrete objective reality. Intuitively, I feel that were he to abstract his thoughts from this dimensionally larger world and retreat still further within his mind, he would again bring about an externalization of time. He would discover that every time he retreats into his inner mind and brings about an externalization of time, space becomes dimensionally larger. And he would therefore conclude that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the climbing of multitudinous dimensional time block. And he would therefore conclude that both time and space are serial, and that the drama of life is but the climbing of a multitudinous dimensional time block. Multitudinous is a word that Seth often used as well as multidimensional reality. Oh, very, very powerful paragraph. There's a lot of layers in the lasagna in this one paragraph, and we can go on and on and on, but we'll keep moving. I guess I hope we're getting the gist of how we just are. The ultimate bottom line is just to feel the imagination as the reality. Then your waking self is the shadow. That's very important. Just slip that in there. Scientists will one day explain why there is a serial universe, but in practice, how we use this serial universe to change the future is more important. To change the future, we need only concern ourselves with two worlds in the infinite series. The world we know by reason of our bodily organs, and the world we perceive independently of our bodily organs. Wow. End of chapter. That last sentence was very, very powerful. I mean, you know the world as your bodily organs in sense. You can sense the temperature. But when you close your eyes and you imagine your bodily organs, you can imagine them healthy. You can imagine them functioning perfectly. You can imagine all of your arteries open and clear. You can imagine your lungs taking in oxygen, expelling carbon monoxide, getting rid of toxins. You can imagine all this working in harmony. That's your fourth dimensional reality. You can simply imagine that. You can imagine yourself walking down the aisle. You can imagine being there with your most beautiful bride or groom. You can imagine saying, I do. You can imagine the hug and the kiss. You can imagine walking into your house after your honeymoon 2 weeks in Hawaii. That is fourth dimensional reality. The more you repeat that, the more it's going to make that concrete into physical 3D shadow. You can imagine going to your bank account and transferring and paying off your entire credit cards in one fell swoop. Just put the numbers on there. You can imagine that you're walking to your computer, you're paying off all debts, every single one of them. It doesn't matter if you got a mortgage, it doesn't matter if you want to pay your rent a year in advance. All transfers are done, all your taxes, every single thing done. You can imagine that as a reality. You pressed enter, it's done. Now you're congratulating your spouse, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. It's done. That is in fourth dimensional reality. That is as real as you experiencing it in 3D reality. This is 3D reality. Then that is as real as that. That is as real as that because it's casting that. The imagination we just did is casting this. 4D, 3D, 2D. 4D is where it exists primarily first. In time, if we want to go back to this linear use of time, that's first. That's also the present moment. This is second. This is next. The 3D. 4D's first, 3D's next. That is the shadow. That's the shadow. Whatever's moving in 4D, this is 4D. I am wealthy, I am healthy, I am married. The shadow is 3D. That the more this, I'm using my hand here, but the more this is convinced of its imagining in 4D, the more this 3D shadow will take shape. Here's 4D moving. Here's 3D getting the vibe. Wait, oh, you're feeling it real, are you? Okay, wow, look at this. The shadow self, your 3D self, is in line with what you imagined. Bridge of incidents occurs. You go out with friends. All of a sudden, there's the opposite sex that you wanted to meet. That's funny. What a coincidence. It just feels good talking to this person. You go on dates. You go to dinner. All of a sudden, you're engaged and you're married and you're buying a new house or having kids. All of this thing is happening in fourth dimensional space first. Then your 3D self follows. We're not concerned about the shadow because we've seen it. We take it for granted that it's cast on the ground all the time, so we take that for granted. But what we haven't taken for granted is where this shadow has been coming from this whole time. And that's what we're learning here together. We're learning how our four-dimensional self is creating our three-dimensional shadow. And we do that through feeling it real. Feeling it real means going to sleep with the idea in mind, making a subjective impression onto your subjective consciousness. This, to him that it hath, to him that hath it is given. This goes into all consciousness. Him, God, I am. That makes it real. It is given, your new objective reality. It doesn't matter what that reality is. Know where the reality exists. It exists in the fourth dimensions first. It's in your imagination first. 3 dimensions follow. Okay? What a wonderful chapter. Out of This World, Chapter 1. Also the title of the book, Out of This World, Chapter 1. Wow, what a wonderful. Let me know what you liked in that chapter. If you got anything out of that, if anything was new, if you're trying any of these ideas, are you applying them? Let me know, give me some feedback. Let's talk about it. Fun stuff. All right, we'll see you in the next chapter.